What's up, YouTube? It's been a little bit. I know I've been pretty bad about uploading anything the last few weeks. I posted on Twitter about it, but for those of you who don't know, we had a death in the family, and so it's been like a pretty slow few weeks. So I'm slowly starting to kind of get back into it, but if it takes a little bit longer, I apologize for the delay. But that's just kind of what happens. But I saw somebody post on Reddit questions about like what kind of shadow archetype was good right now. And I had this comment that I wrote back to it that was just like, I've had hit and miss results with like Sultai, Demir, Rakdos, Grixis, and I legitimately believe any variation of shadow can be okay at the moment as long as you have a plan for what's going on in the meta right now and you have an idea of what you want to do against a variety of different matchups. And that's kind of what I wanted to showcase here. So if you caught the live stream, you've probably already seen this league. It was a league we had like a week ago that we did play on camera. So the VOD is probably still up on Twitch if you're wanting to watch the actual stream, which I'll have the Twitch link down below, as well as the Twitter if you want to know when a live stream's going live, and the Discord if you want to come join the Control Freak Discord, talk about like Shadow, Rakdos Shadow, any variation of Shadow. But I wanted to show you off some of the kind of Rakdos gameplay for the people who might not have seen the live stream and want to know what's going on with Rakdos. Is there anything that I'm particularly interested in? And I'll have the deck list linked down below. As always, I try to link to like whatever I'm currently running through leagues, so it might not exactly line up with what's on the screen. For example, I think this league I ran some number of Dothy Voidwalker in the sideboard, but I don't have them in this list. I think I swapped them out for the Nihil Spell Bombs. But otherwise, it should be like the same main deck 60, maybe a card or two different in the sideboard. But some of the notable things are like Fable of the Mirror Breaker. It's a card that people have said has been really, really good against the 4-color pile decks because instead of giving you like one threat, you get two bodies. You get the front half, the token that it makes, and when it flips, you get the back half. So two bodies, 4 power. You get the loot effect, so you're able to throw away some of those dead cards, some of those like lightning bolts, late game thought seizes and inquisitions, maybe like a dead bowmaster early, something like that. Shadow if you get solituded, and dig for some more relevant cards like Croxa. Um, you also have the advantage of it being like a 3 mana play when you're really trying to establish your board on turns 1, 2. So it's kind of something that you can do after you've already run out your early threats. If your early threats are sticking, then Fable's sticking. If your early threats aren't sticking, then Fable might give you the opportunity to kind of turn the corner and rebuild. Otherwise, 4 Bowmasters in the main, couple Scourge, couple Croxa. Really want to kind of eat into the late game value that the One Ring and other scam decks and stuff like that are having access to. You will notice no copies of Dragon's Rage Channeler. Um, I think Channeler is like an okay card when you're grinding out value over like the mid to long game, but I don't think it's a very good card at getting your opponent from 20 to 0 aggressively. So I try to avoid it when I can. Obviously, like Bowmaster and Ragavan also fit that mold of not being able to get your opponent dead super aggressively. But I do think like Bowmaster's ability to clog up the board against decks like Scam, as well as potentially outvalue something like the Ring with the pings and the army token, make it a little more invaluable. And then Ragavan's ability to snowball a game from turn 1 is exponentially more impressive than Dragon's Rage Channelers. But if you're one of those people that like really wants to include Chandler, if you think it's just like a knockout card, then you can always go in and drop like a Scourge or two, Battle Rage, some Bowmasters, and find room for Channelers. And I don't think that's just some atrocious idea. But I also like the idea of being a little bit better against cards like Chalice of the Void. In the sideboard, 4 copies of Prismatic Ending. As you notice, the one Godless Shrine in the main, which you can get off any of your black fetches. Prismatic Ending gives a really good answer to cards like Sanctifier on Vec that can potentially stand in your way. It also helps answer things like any Amulet of Vigors, Hardened Scales, anything that you need to exile aggressively. So it's just a really good removal piece for like non-creature permanents that Rakdos typically doesn't have access to good ways of dealing with. Got 2 copies of Turok, 2 Blood Moon, a second copy of Temur Battle Rage for anything unfair, a couple Chalice of the Void EE. Then, like I said, the 3 spell bombs. I'm pretty sure we're 3 Dolthy Voidwalker in this league, but I'm kind of back and forth between the two. Dolthy's obviously really good if you want to attack and be on the aggressive side. Spell bomb's a bit better if you want to make sure that your opponent doesn't have access to their graveyard. So let's just go ahead and jump into some of the matches so you can see how Rakdos does. Maybe find out whether or not it's an archetype that you want to give a shot to. Maybe you're on the fence with like Grixis or Dimir or something. You want to see what other options look like. And I think that's kind of what I try to have my videos do, is show, hey, these are options. Like, it might not be the best variant, but it's good to see what gameplay looks like out of some of these so that you have the chance to maybe adjust going forward. So, opponent's got Channeler. We thought he's away the expressive iteration. We know they're going to have Delirium, but at the end of the day, like, we have a pretty sizable Shadow. Obviously, we would have liked a second land, but we still have Bolt for Channeler. So as long as our opponent is pretty slow at finding another threat, like in this case, we can get down Shadow, we can kill the Channeler, and now we've just got like a big beefy 2-turn clock out there with Bowmasters as kind of a way to fight over anything that could clog up the ground. For example, a Ragavan. We know they've got an Unholy Heat, but they're going to need like double heat to deal with the Shadow. They bobble themselves. They don't see an answer to Shadow, so they're just going to scoop it up here. Definitely the power of Death Shadow is the ability to get down, dodge a bunch of removal spells, especially the red-based removal, and just like stand in front of anything your opponent's got going on. So we're up against Grixis Shadow. Boarded in the Prismatic Endings because Ending can deal with Shadow, Ragavan, Darcy, Bowmaster, Ledger Shredder, all very, very efficiently. Where a lot of the red base removal might not deal with Shadow. Now we could go for the Ragavan, but I think the Blood Moon is more of like a knockout punch here. Obviously, Ragavan hit is very good at snowballing, but if our opponent doesn't have another Ragavan in hand right now, then there's a very reasonable chance they're not going to get away from this this Blood Moon or get out of this Blood Moon. Now that they've lost their EE on the token, I have the ability to get in with Ragavan, hold up, terminate in case they have a Ragavan on the way back. And I think it should be, yeah, like pretty close to over here. As we noticed, they didn't have Gigantha, so good chance they have something like mURktide Regent in the deck, maybe Counterspell. Seen a few of those lists popping up. So this is match number 2. Let's talk about Mulligan decision real quick. The opening 7. So it's 4 lands with Thoughtseize, Wraith, Terminate. Like, we've got some interaction, but with no threat, especially in Rakdos, we kind of have to throw this back. In variants like Grixis, this is a little more keepable, even though 4 lands is a bit much. Or in variants with Gigantha, this might be a little more keepable, but with no Gigantha, no threat, I think it's pretty easy chunk back. Ragavan down on 1. We could Thoughtseize, but usually if I have the option between Thoughtseize and Ragavan, I lean towards Ragavan because it's the more snowbally threat. Now, obviously, you can have things that change that decision, like if you bobble your opponent and you happen to see, I don't know, something on top that you don't want, or something on top that messes up the Ragavan plan. Maybe you go with Thoughtseize instead, but here we know about Undying Malice off the Thoughtseize, so we're just going to eat that because now we have heat that can kill the Ragavan. We can bolt it, we can whatever, but really just trying to tap this Ragavan down so we can get a clear attack in. Hit a bolt off of their library, opponent scoops to that, because once you start like getting the additional value off Ragavan of being able to cast your opponent's stuff, just gets really, really out of hand really, really quickly. So on the draw, have a bauble to help find a second land. We can crack this bauble before our opponent gets a Bowmaster. One of the plays I talk about all the time is not bobbling on your own main phase in the Thoughtseize mirrors, because all you're doing is drawing a card into their potential hand disruption. But I think Bowmaster changes that up a reasonable bit here, because now if I wait till my opponent's turn and crack bobble, they can Bowmaster on my upkeep. If I don't deal with it right there, then they get to get an extra ping, grow the army token, and I think that's more than I care to deal with. So I'm just going to go for the bobble right away. Try to hit the land. Dolthy's pretty reasonable, but we do have answers to the Dolthy. Now, Ragavan's pretty annoying because, as we know, they have a Shieldred in hand, and I don't currently have a good way of dealing with the Shieldred. Now, if I hit the second land and I can terminate, then I'm okay. Okay-ish. I could play out Shadow, but I think dealing with the Shieldred's a little more important. I let them get the... I don't think the 2 life really matters here, but I kind of wanted to give them the opportunity to dash in Ragavan or something so I could get Bowmaster value, then untap and terminate on my turn. But since they didn't go for the Ragavan, I just went for the terminate. They could have an Undying effect, but I'd still be able to untap and double bolt. So it's not like the end of the world. It's not perfectly ideal either, don't get me wrong, but it could be substantially worse. All right, so we know they have a lightning bolt. I can get down Scourge pretty freely. If they want to like double up removal spells on the Scourge, that's fine. But it looks like they're just going to go for the Kroxa. But you have plenty of stuff to discard of that. Then Ragavan. So let's pause here because this was a pretty interesting decision point. I was trying to come up with some way that I could get the game over with this turn guaranteed. And if you see a line that I didn't, then feel free to drop it in the comments down below. But what I was thinking was I could attack all out, and if they don't block the Scourge, I double bolt them, and I've got lethal. But if I attack all out and they say chump block the Scourge with the Ragavan, then they still have Kroxa. They get a potential attack back that I have to chump block. And Kroxa would just like eat the Bowmaster, eat the army token. Doesn't really matter. But I don't feel like I really accomplished too much. But if I Bowmaster the Ragavan, like the fact that the only way I can kill is if Scourge connects or Scourge gets through unblocked, makes it a little more awkward. If I Bowmaster the Ragavan and attack out, then I no longer have lethal, because even if they don't block the Scourge and I bolt them, they go down to 11. Scourge becomes a 9/9. Bowmaster is a 1/1. So I'm dealing 10 while they're at 11, putting them down to 1 because they're going to block the army token. So I have no way of like guaranteeing lethal if I kill the Ragavan. Because all they have to do is block the army or just block the Scourge, but I assume they block the army. So if I can't guarantee lethal, then my best chance is Bowmaster down the Ragavan. The only unfortunate part is if I Bowmaster the Ragavan, then I no longer guarantee that they have to block the Scourge. So it's a very much a cat and mouse situation. I could like double bolt the Kroxa. I thought about attacking with everything, double bolting the Kroxa, and then playing like the Shadow, but then I'm dead to double bolt. And I'm just trying to like think of the most ways that most ways for me to win the game right now. And I kind of decide I can't beat double bolt. There's no line of play I can do that guarantees I beat double bolt. So if I can't beat double bolt, then I think my best chance is to solidify my board position as much as I can in the face of anything other than double bolt. And that kind of just becomes like clog up the ground. Now, if they hit another lightning bolt off the top of my library, so be it. Fortunately, they do not. And they don't draw away to kill Scourge. So it did get a little sketchy there. But thankfully, we got out of it. And it did turn out we needed all the bodies on board. So this is round number 3. This Tevzi opponent actually played in like the league prior to this. They were on this Lonis combo deck, which if you've watched me play in any of the leagues in the last like couple weeks, I cannot beat this deck to save my life. I feel like it does not matter what I do. They always have what they need to get out of it. So I'm really hoping for a little bit of a Control Freak redemption arc here. Like you see Haywire Might into Scourge of the Skyclaves, and you get a little apprehensive. And either way, I'm feeling reasonable about game 1 because I just have like a really quick clock, bunch of beefy bodies, so we're kind of okay there. But going into games 2 and 3, like it seems like every time I zig, they zag. So I'm going with this approach of like boarding out some Ragavans because they get chumped really, really easily by all the tokens. Boarding out some Bowmasters because they don't really do a good job of killing anything or swinging through. And just trying to play like a reasonable Shadow game. Trying to be aggressive with my clock. Disruptive enough. This is definitely one of those matchups that I really want extra battle rages in. Is being able to battle rage through like a Cauldron Familiar is a really big deal. With them having Saga plus Cauldron Familiar. Pretty rough. But all I can really do is like keep being aggressive with my attacks and hope. Obviously, if I had a Dolphy here, things would be a lot better. I've thought about running like Stone of Eric, since it exiles when something dies. It's a little bit better with Rakdos. That's mostly damage-based removal and destroy effects, as opposed to something like Dimir or Grixis that could have more counter effects, more exile effects, whatever the case may be. But I know that I'm dead on board here. I think if they find any way to make a token, which they did, but I really like can't do anything else It's a very, very rough situation to be in where they're just able to make all these chump blockers. So it's here that I'm dead on board because they can untap, make a food with the goose, get back the cat, and then have a lethal attack in. So yeah, on to game 3. Like, the amount of chump blockers this deck puts out is kind of insane. Definitely one where having access to Dragon's Rage Channeler would be better. But I don't think I want to make a bunch of my 75 decisions based off like just this deck. I don't think this deck is popular enough, or I don't think the Samwise combo decks in general are popular enough to warrant that sort of attention. And then, yeah, opponent doesn't find anything to do, and we actually managed to beat a Samwise combo deck for once. It's a Christmas miracle, as the kids would say. But if I saw that deck a lot more often, which I do see it more often online than I do in like paper, but if I saw it more often online, I might consider trying to find some better sideboard tech for it. Like, I would think Dolphy would be good enough, but every time I run into the deck, I either like never see the Dolphy, or they're on Abzan and they have like Skyclave Apparition and they just play that, or like Chord for it, and everything falls apart. I do think the matchup against the Abzan variant is much worse because they have access to all the Grists and Skyclave Apparitions and more consistent mana. All right, so looking at possibly like Bolt myself, untap, Battle Rage, something like that. Good old Amulet Titan. All right. So Unholy Heat's really good draw because now I have the ability to fight over like a Titan or something. So if they untap, play a bounce land, play a Titan, and go to haste it up, I can respond to them targeting the Titan with the haste land by Unholy Heating. And if they don't go for haste land for whatever reason, then... Which I am like a little surprised here. I don't know why they wouldn't go for the haste land here, why they would go for Bajuka Bog. Like, I get that Kroxa is there, but I don't think Kroxa is enough of a reason to not go for the haste land. So if they manage to sniff out Unholy Heat, that's pretty impressive. I don't know if that's a card that you normally expect to like try to play around with or against Rakdos. Grix is sure, but all right. So opponent gets a Titan. I've got kind of that same lineup. If they decide to try to haste up the Titan, I can go for Battle Rage. Again, they don't go for a haste land. They just go for bounce land Teleria West, try to like Titan again next turn and make a construct. This means that if they don't double block, they're dead because I can terminate the blocker and then Battle Rage the Shadow. Or if they block with just a 2/2 construct, I can just Battle Rage. But ultimately, I thought my opponent like played that game a little awkwardly. Not in like a stream sniping way, but in like a... I don't know why they wouldn't go to haste up the Titan game 1 into open mana. And then, even after I did use the Unholy Heat and they Bajuka Bogged my yard, why they wouldn't try to haste up the next Titan. I get the value plan, but I don't really know if that was like the value plan scenario right there. I think that was more the, hey, try to win the game here scenario. But what do I know? It's like if they haste up the Titan, I had to block it. In which case, they could just assign all the damage to the Shadow. And even if I get back Kroxa, they still have just have a Titan. So who knows? I could kill the Dryad, decide to drop the Blood Moon here just to try to shut off like the next thing they can do. Because the way this works is all these non-basic lands are mountains if I play the Blood Moon after the Dryad. They do have this one ring, though, and I don't think I'm going to be able to beat the ring, especially if they find a basic. But figure we'll see. I think this is just like a opponent had it all kind of situation. Had the quick ring on turn 2, had the Titan, had the Boseiju. Like, we can kill the Titan, that's great, but I don't think we can kill the Titan and beat the ring, especially if they just draw another copy of a ring. Or that. So, yeah, on to game 3. Usually, Amulet Titan should be like a reasonable matchup for Rakdos Shadow. You got a pretty quick one-sided clock, like you're just trying to get your opponent dead. They don't play a ton of interaction. I say as I see engineered explosives. Let's rewind and look at the Thoughtseize decision. Why are you not stopping when I want you to stop? There you go. Okay, so Thoughtseize, we see Amulet of Vigor, EE, Generous Int, Primeval Titan, One Ring. Pretty balanced hand. We know we have the second Thoughtseize, so we can take another thing. So there's an option here to take like Amulet and then take the One Ring, or take One Ring, take Primeval Titan. But I think if I just Thoughtseize the EE, then I'll have a fast enough clock to kind of like kill my opponent before they're able to do anything relevant. So take the EE, they get the Amulet down. I get to take the One Ring here to stop the fog effect, get down Shadow. And now with Fetch, Shock, Bolt myself, I have a 2-turn clock. Except they just top deck another Engineered Explosives, and that kind of means game over for us. Like, my best bet is to try to get a chip attack in here, which doesn't work. So, yeah. It's funny how a game can go from, like, so in your favor to you lose the game in just, like, one random draw step. And that was absolutely it. Just like, hey, we are winning this game with a quick Shadow, even drew the Battle Rage. But it doesn't matter because of the top deck Engineered Explosives. And then my opponent, after the EE, has drawn Teleria West, Boseiju. We knew they had the Int for the Forest. So they're able to just curve out into a Titan. And yeah, magic. Belikid's gonna shoot me in the face, and we are dead. So yeah, that's the joy of modern sometimes, is we joke about the format being full of like one card combos, things like Omnath and the One Ring, Urza's Saga. They're just like, oh, I hit this one card and I just win the game because of it. And it's kind of funny when that happens, but it's not a broken card. It's just like, oh, my opponent top decked in Engineered Explosives, lost the game. So I did get a kick out of that. Up against a 4-color pile opponent for match number 5. Definitely a matchup that I don't enjoy seeing, but it's one we have to have a game plan against if we're going to be halfway relevant in Modern. And then getting to see like the Delighted Halfling start against a deck that doesn't really care about Delighted Halfling is a little bit nicer. Like Delighted Halfling Wrenn not as oppressive for Rakdos as it is for something like Grixis or Dimir. And then I also get to see how this Fable tech does. This is the first time, I think this is like the second league that I've played Rakdos, but it's the first day that I've played Fable of the Mirror Breaker in Rakdos, so I had no idea how the card was actually going to perform. I was really curious to see. Ditch Croaks into the yard so we can get that back. So now we have a lethal bolt if we need it. And I have a choice here. I could just bolt my opponent to like show the lethal, but I was kind of thinking they might have counterspell. So I was going to start with the Kroxa to see if they counterspelled the Kroxa. But as soon as they didn't counterspell the Kroxa, then it became, all right, I'm just going to bolt them as soon as they put another thing on the stack. But I'm not going to let them go to their draw step without bolting. So they still could have had a counterspell, and that would have been completely reasonable because they would have been able to bolt, untap, Ren down tick, second Ren down tick, all protected with counterspell. But at that point, I really can't play around counterspell. So we got a Chalice of the Void on 1 against our hand of Rag, Unholy Heat, Thoughtseize. So pretty good chance we're going to be out of this one quick. Like if we found a couple more lands, maybe we would have had a chance. But it's kind of that gamble that you take. So on turn 1, we could have played out a Ragavan, which would have been really good into our opponent having Chalice. But instead, we played out the land and passed so that our opponent couldn't play a Ren and down tick on our Ragavan. And that just ended up really backfiring against Chalice. So I think I ended up going into game 4, or game 3, boarding in a couple extra copies of Prismatic Ending. But here we've got really good start, like really, really good curve of Rag into Thoughtseize, into Fable, into potential Turok. Our opponent's on a mold of 5, which looks even better. Unfortunately, their mold of 5 involves 2 copies of Ren and 6. So even if we do get to take one of them, or if we did take one of them, they'd have a second copy. So we decided to just take the Teferi instead. They Leyline Binding my Fable, which is fine because I have the Goblin token, which gets me my mana for Turok. And then I'm just like crossing my fingers. We have a 67% chance to hit the ring out of their hand, and we do. So now we're, I wouldn't say we're cruising by any means, but we're at least putting a lot of good pressure on our opponent. We don't really care about this Ren ultimate. We're just going to keep ticking away at them because, like, ultimately, who cares about the Ren? Who cares about the Ren when you can just get your opponent unalive very quickly? So that's Rakdos. I do think Fable of the Mirror Breaker performed really, really well. I think that's a card that I've underestimated in like Grixis, where I think you have much better options when you have access to cards like Expressive Iteration and now mURktide, Regent, Counterspell, or if you're going like one of the scam packages, you have that stuff. I think those are better overall. But for a version like Rakdos that doesn't really have a big follow-up, I think Fable can provide a lot of necessary punch. Now, we have tried Rakdos with the scam package before, and I think that's fine. Apparently, like, the scam stuff is all the rage right now. We've seen Dimir running around with scam. We've seen some Grixis shadow scam lists. So if you're really dead set on the scam package, you can, but just understand that, like, this list is not trying to play the same game as scam. We're not trying to be like a cheese you out Blood Moon deck. We're trying to be a get on the board, have the biggest creature present, disrupt our opponent enough to get some damage through, and then finish off with burn, battle rage, bowmaster, whatever the case may be. Uh, we are a very, very honest, straightforward style of Magic the Gathering deck, but hopefully we can have a lot of game and not be so all in on something turn 1 or 2, kind of like Scam is. One of the things I'm always interested about in these lists is trying to maximize 4-ofs. So I could see myself cutting some of these idle 1-ofs, like the 1 Inquisition of Kozilek. Maybe for a second Battle Rage, I could see cutting like the 2 Scourges, the 2 Terminates to try to max out some other stuff. Add the 4th Heat in over like the 2nd Terminate. I could see cutting or going back to the 4 Dolthy. Maybe going up a Blood Moon, something like that. Really trying to maximize the amount of times that you see the cards that you want to see. Because ultimately, like, we don't really have the grind potential to dig for certain pieces. So we want to kind of maximize how often we're seeing those just naturally playing the game. And I would say you could go like the Leyline route, Leyline of the Void, if you wanted another Grave Hate piece or a better Grave Hate piece. And maybe that's a reasonable answer, but personally, I hate Leyline with a passion. Like, the fact that the card is completely useless if it's not in your opening hand means you have to mull hands that would be functional just because they don't have Leyline if you've decided that Leyline is an important enough piece of whatever matchup you're against. Whereas like Nile Spellbomb and Dolthy, you can play them out turn 2, play them out turn 1 with Spellbomb, whatever. Draw into them and they're still pretty good. So it just depends on how badly you want to nuke the graveyard. But I do want to try out Leyline at some point, because if the mURktide decks are on the rise and Scam's still around and stuff like the Lonis combo decks are around with the cat, the Cauldron Familiar, then maybe it's worth having like that all-in Grave Hate piece. But I don't know. I haven't played enough in the last like week or two to really have any deterministic opinions. But anyway, hope y'all enjoyed the video. Like I said, this is a little bit of Rakdos, a little bit of what I've been playing recently. So if you're thinking this is an archetype you're wanting to pick up, let me know what kind of changes you make, how they're working for you, what you're seeing that I might not have seen in this league, what's really shining for you. Let me know. Obviously, like I said, I'll have a link to the Discord down below if you want to come chat about it or come leave some opinions. Otherwise, hope y'all have a fantastic rest of your day. Stay safe, enjoy some good food and company. I will catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.